I am thrilled to have on today Yisroel Wahl, who is a longtime friend, not former guest of the show, I guess a previous person that I've, to be honest with you, the thing that has made the biggest impression for me, you're a therapist, you're a coach, is just the quality of the work that you do. I follow you, I read a lot of the stuff that you put out, and it's really an honor and pleasure because we're going to talk about some things today that I think are absolutely fundamental. The more that the world changes, the more relevant it is, the concepts of anxiety, work, and kind of like how to finally overcome it. So I'm excited. Thank you very much for being here today.
Yeah, it truly is an honor. And I've been on, different shows over the past while, and I really was looking forward to this one. Not only because the last time was awesome, but just because the topic is so huge and we really can be helped. There are things that can be done. And unfortunately, not everyone feels that way. People have been looking for help for so long and trying things and maybe haven't gotten there. So really, really excited for this. I think it can really be transformative for so many people.
Amazing. So talk to me about what is anxiety, because we throw the word around a lot. Words like trauma, also, like everyone's talking about it. How do I know if I have anxiety? How does it show up? What are the effects of it in my day-to-day life and in my work?
So, like you said, everyone throws around the words anxiety today. It's like, I have anxiety. I'm anxious about this. I'm anxiety about that. And the truth is, I'm not even going to jump into exact definitions because I think for our conversation, it doesn't make that much of a difference. For too many people, they're living their life with a really heavy load. And I'm going through life, and my entire life revolves around this anxiety. And I want to make this clear because it's super important. There's different kinds of anxiety. We could have anxiety that's more specific, and we could have a general anxiety disorder that's more general. But whatever the anxiety is, say someone is anxious about, I don't know, walking into a store, right? It doesn't matter what it is, but their entire day starts becoming consumed about moving around this issue, right? How do I get around it? What am I going to do in this situation? What am I going to do in that situation? Every situation becomes super like all encompassing this issue and becomes this heavy load on our shoulders. And I think that's,
so you're saying anxiety is discomfort. Could be it's fear. It's an emotional sense. And then what naturally happens next is that we go into a strategy of avoidance. I don't want to do this. So what else becomes possible? But eventually what you're saying is that now you're carrying both the emotional load. This thing makes me uncomfortable, or maybe just things make me uncomfortable. And then all of the avoidance strategies that we you're the expert, subconsciously or consciously create to keep us out of that difficult situation.
1,000,000,000%. And I think that when we talk about what is anxiety, obviously we could take it through the lens of exactly how to define it. But I think for our conversations, what's most important is exactly what you said. How much of my life is being affected by it? How much of my life is, and it doesn't mean because I'm anxious about everything, but I'm anxious about one thing. And now my entire life is affected because I'm trying to get around it because of avoidance, or I can't manage, so it's affecting my relationships. I can't sleep at night, so it's affecting obviously my day, my health issues that come from it. It's so all encompassing. And that's where it becomes just so overwhelming and people just sit in darkness, and which is so unfortunate.
Okay, amazing. And in terms of work, how does this play out? Obviously, work has all kinds of anxiety creating issues. Things like, again, like, in my coaching business, one of the things that we work with, the fear to get started, the fear of failure, the fear of success in a lot of cases, imposter syndrome, which all of these things I think could be very, again, if it creates emotional discord, you would say kind of falls into this, I have anxiety around either this specific thing, or just it creates a feeling of anxiety in general, correct?
I mean, you can argue back and forth, to be honest, like exactly how it is that just a fear that I have? Is that more of anxiety? But in many situations, it doesn't matter that much, right? At the end of the day, if I can't get things done because I have this fear and it starts affecting me in so many different areas, then kind of, it's probably time to get some help and figure that out.
Okay, so let's help the people. and let's make this tailor-made for work. I know that your specialty, has always been helping people, again, which is, I think, a lot more difficult, helping children and helping, parents, children, which again is, if once you're kind of working with adults and working in a work environment, maybe it's easier, hopefully it's easier. Certainly working with kids is not simple, and you've spent quite a while, really perfecting your craft there. So what are some strategies, or what are some approaches that people can actually take in order to get themselves out of the mire?
So big open question, but I'm just going to jump on one thing because it's kind of funny that you mentioned it with kids, because there's something interesting in kids, and I've been working with children, teens for over a decade now, and it's always been like my thing, And I think I was thinking about it recently. I was thinking about how maybe part of it is also like it's a tough age, and it kind of is like I'm going to perfect this age, Let me work on that age because they're really tough age. They're kind of preteens, teens, and they're not interested in getting help. And for them, there's what to do, and for them, there's ways to make it better, and that is so much more true in many situations for adults. Yes, when it comes to adults, there's so much baggage which children may not have, but we can kind of work with ourselves. When it comes to children, comes to teens, not necessarily interested or invested, coming to the office, just throwing things at me, at least when we start. And then we kind of have to work off of that. But how do we work with anxiety? And I want to, before I even go down the road of kind of what, I want to just jump on it for a minute and talk about like what's happening. What is anxiety? Because I think in many ways, what people feel is that when I'm anxious about something, people get very stuck on the idea of my mind is kind of messed up, right? My brain is I got this anxiety. And without going too far into it, we hear so much about chemical imbalances, and it's not a conversation for now, but it kind of has been jumped on because it makes people, takes off that victim mentality of like putting people into that, we don't want to get people too stuck in victim, but most of it is at best unproven, at the very best, but it's probably much less than that.
One second. So because most people go, and again, it could be the tremendous amount of money being made by the pharmaceutical industries, right? But the idea is most people, when they're feeling anxiety, jump to this idea that there's a chemical imbalance and I have to find some kind of medical solution to treat it. That's what you're suggesting. And,
yes.
And again, you're saying that the evidence is not clear that way. And it's very possible that isn't the first thing that's actually wrong, that maybe just human experiences are stressful.
More than not proven. I mean, it hasn't even got to the level of theory. It was something that was pushed many years ago, and then it was kind of jumped on. And I think even in the therapy world, we kind of like it in many ways because it makes people feel not so bad about themselves. Kind of, I got a chemical imbalance. There's truth to the idea that there's some imbalance now, but that idea that a chemical imbalance caused it all is not something that's been proven any which way or form. But the reason why it's important is because there's nothing, we could, if it makes us feel better and be like, okay, something's imbalanced. I mean, something is imbalanced, right? I mean, I'm having all these kind of thoughts that are throwing me off. That's not quote unquote normal. So something is wrong, but we kind of mess ourselves up when we get stuck in that space of, I am messed up. And if we look at anxiety for a moment, like take that step back, like what is anxiety? Like what's happening over here? And anxiety in its most basic form is the body working right to a perceived threat. There's nothing wrong. If I see a car coming down the road and I'm standing in the road and I feel anxious about it, no one would call that anxiety because that's just a normal, healthy fear. When the body's being triggered by different thoughts and different ideas and is leading me to be triggered and I feel anxious, that's healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way it's supposed to be. The problem is why I'm getting triggered, why it's getting to that level of feeling triggered, and why I'm constantly stuck in that space of getting those anxious thoughts. The problem isn't how I respond. And we have to remember that, because when we get stuck in this idea of like, something's wrong with me, we get so stuck, so can't get out of the space. So like, oh, it's hopeless. And it's not. We just have to figure out what's happening, why I'm getting stuck in that space, where that process is going, and how do I let the mind flow? And if I could jump on that for one more second, because we're a bit all over the place, but I just want to refine that a bit. When we're in a space when I'm having anxiety or I'm anxious about something, where my body is going to respond a certain way just because I'm anxious. What emotions are kind of supposed to do in a healthy situation is just flow. That means that I can have a thought that kind of induces anxiety and then it leaves.
Okay, I got to stop you because I think that these two things are extremely clear bullet points in terms of like waging the war, so to speak, on anxiety. Number one is not to jump into default. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my mind. That to right away to take away the ownership you have over solving your own problems, which is, again, one of the fundamental things that is such a culture of the companies that I run and work with is you have to take, it's not in my idea, extreme ownership, right? That you have to say, look, what can I do? This is my problem to solve, not to default and say there's something wrong with me. And like you said, by definition, therefore I have to seek the doctors, therefore I have to seek. Just number one is like, I'm experiencing something and it might be up to me to solve the problem. The second piece that I'm hearing you say is that if you accept that you'll have emotions and the emotions are normal, they'll kind of, again, the average emotional quotient that a person goes through during the day, there'll be some sadness, there'll be some rage, there'll be some fear, there'll be some happiness. And if you just let the emotions flow through you as opposed to getting stuck, it's going to be fundamental in terms of, and so valuable to move past that.
So 100% on both points. I'm just going to jump in, kind of what I said I wouldn't do, but I'm just going to jump in and say, the problem is that when I'm struggling with anxiety, it's so overwhelming. I can't just do much of anything. And I can't kind of take that ownership because I don't have a path. That's kind of why I got on this show, because I don't have that path. And that's what's so horrendous, because people are stuck in this space where, the idea of taking ownership is, even mentioning it is unfair because they're not capable of it. Because how can I take ownership, right? I can't do it. I don't know how. I don't have the skills to do it out. And if I try doing it, all I do is get depressed because, like, hey, oh, it's my fault, right? And this messed up life that I'm living through no fault of my own, zero, is all of a sudden even more on my shoulders. And that's kind of why that whole chemical imbalance thing became so popular. We were like, it's not your fault, which is true. It's just that there are things that can be done that can transform us. So if we have the right path and we have the right help, we can get over it. If we don't, then it's impossible.
So what do we do?
So, that's where we're jumping in this idea of what anxiety is, because I think the most essential point in many ways is recognizing what the end goal is. The end goal, and that's exactly what you were pointing out. The end goal is that my emotions will flow. And I like to give this analogy. You walk outside and there's so many things. It's freezing here. Maybe not by you, but it's freezing here. You walk outside and I'm going to automatically feel the cold, but you walk outside, you see the grass, you see the cars, right? You see, the houses, the birds, there's so many things going on, right? Most of us don't notice all of them. We kind of notice one thing or nothing if we're super focused, which is unfortunate, but we don't see everything. That isn't because there isn't messages coming to my head about those things. It's because there's a filter that filters out things that aren't as important to me now. So it's not that none of these things sort of came to my subconscious at the very least. It's that none of these things mattered enough for it to give me those messages and to get stuck on that. The difference when it comes to anxiety is that those same messages kind of come up. They always kind of do. They just never entered my conscious mind if I'm not struggling with anxiety. Well, when I am struggling with anxiety, it's a loop of those messages. So take the, say someone is afraid of, I don't know, his house burning down, right? So every time he goes to sleep, it's like, let me check everything again and again. And let me see if the plugs are in right and the sockets are right and the things on the oven, and I keep on checking. I'm nervous and I can't sleep and all those kind of things. It's not that for someone else that message may not have occurred. It's that message came in and left. Whereas when I'm struggling with anxiety, it came in and it's stuck. Not only is it stuck, it continues to revolve and revolve and revolve. And we have to understand why that happens and what our end goal is. And what there's that mechanism. And help me out here if I'm not being clear. But there's that mechanism that kind of tells us what to focus on that's being triggered when I'm struggling with anxiety by things that it doesn't necessarily have to be triggered by, and it's continuously triggered. And that's where the anxiety comes in.
So part of it is that awareness that it's not the specific problem at all, but it is the loop that is kind of accelerating the problem and then not letting it go, which is such a fundamental component when you start to understand, really, I'm not trying to create a scenario where my house could never burn down, but I'm trying to create a scenario where I don't have to live with anxiety. And so it's shifting the focus. What you're saying is, let's not worry about the house burning down. Again, obviously, I always will mention these kinds of concepts. It's like, yeah, due diligence, like don't light random fires and go to sleep. But on the flip side, realize that the real battle is with anxiety. And it's not it's not that fundamental fear that you have that's actually creating the anxiety. The anxiety is itself, and it's kind of like latching on to this particular fear that you have.
I love how you said that, because we generally look at it and we say, I'm worried about that fire and therefore I'm anxious. Where very, very often when it comes to anxiety, it's I'm anxious and therefore I worry about the fire. And that's
because if the fire would go, someone else, you'd find something else to be anxious about, because the
right
reality
now,
is just you're
always, because
right.
of the traumas and things that cause me to be specific about specific things. But at the very end, even if my anxiety is sort of rooted in one area, it's that I'm anxious about that area, and therefore I'm worried about this specific entity. Whereas a healthy kind of situation is a car is coming and therefore I'm anxious about the car. Here it's, I'm anxious about being hit, therefore I'm imagining a car's coming. So absolutely. It's a flip. And when we realize that, it really gets to a concept I talk about often, which is the key to overcoming anxiety is not to not have anxious thoughts. The key to overcoming anxiety is the anxious thoughts can come and they don't trigger anything. They just come and go.
Which I would venture to say is such a crucial switch of the equation, because very often people are shooting for the impossible in the fact that I never want to be stressed out ever. Right. And again, if you are using some kind of chemical compound, perhaps that's a possibility. But in general, again, even still, like, obviously, like your tolerance changes. So that's
not. I wish it worked that way. I wish we could just take those pills and sort of.
I wish we could create those pills and then sell it to people, because it would be phenomenally profitable, right? But I think the idea is very, very clear that a person has to develop realistic expectations. Again, you're going to start a business. It's not always going to go straight up. There's going to be ups and downs, right? When you get in a marriage, it's not always going to be blissful and fantastic. And so where most people get screwed up is not the process itself, but the expectations of what it looks like when it's done. I'm never going to live a stress-free life. Rather, the stress is not going to get stuck. So that's a third flip, it sounds like, in a very short period of time that we're making on anxiety, is don't try to cure yourself to the extent that you never have it, but cure yourself to the point that you have it along with every other feeling, and it doesn't stick out as this biggest problem that you've ever had.
100%, although I would somewhat disagree on this point, and I think it's fundamental, because I think so many people are stuck in this space where they're like, I'm not struggling with anxiety. I'm not anxious anymore. And even with clients, I'm not anxious anymore. It's not taking over my life. I'm not worried about it on a day-to-day, but I kind of have these feelings of just like, I'm not comfortable. Or people that are like, I can't be comfortable unless I'm in the office. Right. So it's like, okay, you have some anxiousness or anxiety in life, and that's okay. And I would kind of flip that, because I don't necessarily agree. We will have stresses, but they don't have to cause us angst. In a perfect world, I'm not saying we have to even strive for perfection over here, but in a perfect world, it's like there's something that kind of worries me, and then it just goes. It's not that I'm worried on 10% level. It's like I felt anxious, and yeah, my hand hurts, so therefore I go to the doctor, or I made an appointment by the doctor. I'm not sitting and worrying about that.
I think the two pieces which are absolutely brilliant and need to be explained. I think number one is, again, when you've cured yourself, it's not like you're flooded with good emotions. It's just that the same things you find I call it like almost like a scar tissue, where you're like, wow, I've really been uncomfortable about this before. It's not like I feel phenomenal, but I'm just like, actually isn't bothering me. And it's such a weird transition, because it's almost like I used to call like the other idea of like a ghost limb, when someone would lose a limb and they still feel like they have feeling in their arm, even though they don't have an arm anymore. Right. It's that same thing with the emotional, right? Where you're like, I'm stressed. You're like, actually, I'm not actually stressed by this. Actually, okay. So that's what cured sounds like, just in your experience. Like, cured is, this doesn't have an emotional drain on me anymore, and that's super important. And the other thing that you were saying is like, again, I see this all the time with the executive coaches, the executive coaching practice that I have, is like, I'll have people that will be able to sit in the office for 14 hours a day and just have a great time. And then they go home and they just can't be there. And so they go back to the office. And what you're saying is that if you realize that you don't have to run away when you feel uncomfortable, and why is it? Again, could be in the office, you say something and it happens, and at home it doesn't. Or it could be in the office, you have a great, fluid functional relationship, and at home maybe you don't, or you have trouble with your kids at home, or you have trouble with your spouse at home. And it's like recognizing you're not anxious. You can experience negative emotion. That's what you're saying. Figure out what's causing the negative emotion. Give yourself the grace to realize that this is actually a difficult situation. And then don't take on that thing that I have to avoid it. I could just sit in it for a little bit and experience it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And then it moves on. Like, I think there's this fundamental idea that people feel, and even people who aren't struggling with anxiety, I feel like almost can't exist. They almost don't believe it. And that is, life can work without being in a state of stress. That's all.
Life can work simple, but like, without staying in a state of stress. So
without having a state of stress, like literally, like, people have such a hard time at that. It's almost, and there's so many reasons. I don't want to go down that road, but so many reasons. It kind of gives us a feeling of that I matter in many ways, the fact that I am stressed and all that kind of stuff. But like, just imagine life that doesn't have a heavy load on your shoulders. There's no load. You just are. Like, that's kind of awesome, right? But I think for I don't know most, but for so many people, it's not even a dream. They don't imagine it. So, I literally just, like, this week, I was working with a client. I don't know, we maybe worked for like 2 months or something. And the client says to me, and we were working with anxiety, and we're like, I never imagined I would ever be here. Like, I gave up, and I was, that's it. And the client was like, I thought I would just, go on medication. I wish medication worked that way, but it was like, I never imagined I would ever be here. I never imagined I'd be able to get through my day without that load on my shoulders. And it was awesome to hear. Right. But but even for people who aren't in that space where anxiety is like kind of taking over their life, the idea of, I can live life without being overwhelmed. I can live life without needing to control everything. I can live life just doing things and enjoying it. And the concepts are so foreign. So we moved off of anxiety in many ways, because I wouldn't call that anxiety, but I think the idea of freedom in people's minds, the idea of like, my life can just work and I can just be happy, is so foreign to so many people, which is so unfortunate.
Well, I think what I'm hearing you say is first of all, people don't see the outcome, which again, in the work that I'm doing, it's like, just tell people, no, you can actually, again, we help people build coaching businesses. And so one of the things is just like, no, you can actually get money. People actually pay you for getting them the help that they need. And they're like, just creating that vision first and foremost. Like, are you serious? And then you show them like real people that are actually doing it. You're like, wow, I didn't realize that. So the first thing you're saying is, in terms of a healthy mindset, without feeling like you have the weight on the world the weight of the world on your shoulders. So that's totally possible. And you actually know, that's actually a normal way to be, is to go through the world without having that fear. That's the first thing, having that weight. And the second thing is recognizing that maybe the reason why you have this anxiety is not because there's anything actually wrong, but because you are actually benefiting by putting all of this pressure on yourself. It creates a sense of control. It creates a sense of normalcy. You grew up in a home where we were always stressed out. So like, I don't know what it looks like if we aren't stressed out. And so what you're saying is, people get used to it. It actually serves their vision of normalcy. And one of the big shifts that you have to make is to give people at least the option. Hey, do you want to not hate your life? Hey, do you want to feel like you're okay? Hey, do you want to feel like you don't have to control everything down to the nearest degree? And would you like to just be happy?
Yeah, 1,000%. And you made that a lot clearer than I did. Often anxiety, I don't know if I should use the word anxiety, there's all kinds of roots to it, but often a lot of the difficulty in my life is, without recognizing it, without realizing it, we don't realize how much of it is, I kind of need life this way. And part of it is because I'm used to it. Part of it is the way I was brought up. And if I don't have that, I'm not sure what to do with myself. And you find this all the time with people at work and stuff. It's like outside the office, I'm just not myself. And it's like, no, really, that shouldn't be like that, right? It's not like, oh, I'm meant to be this way. It's not like I'm like, some people like, yeah, listen, the office is my space, no. We can live a life where no, we don't need any of that. We can just live and not need to be in any space and feel comfortable in all kinds of spaces. And often it is that way. Often it's it makes me feel better. It gives meaning to my life and all those kind of things. And learning to live with myself becomes so essential. So we've gone way off anxiety for a bit here, but it's such an important concept because we're talking about that vision of a life without anxiety, talking about a vision of a life that's just good is so foreign to people. And that's kind of why I even got into doing video. It was like, people need answers, right? People need answers. And there's too many people that are struggling for years and they're so sure there's no answer. It's like, and sometimes I have that and it makes me sad. It's like, I've gone to therapy for 10 years, right? I've gone to therapy for 10 years and I'm like, okay. And like, where are you up to? And it's like, well, I'm not sure. Maybe I learned some skills. Like, man, I don't want to say that. Like, I don't know anyone's situation.
No, I think it also, but what we're talking about is, and this is why I'm so excited to have you on this and also excited to be sort of helping with the process of like sort of the next step here is like, what are the reasonable expectations? So again, a person might be used to going to therapy for 10 years. And again, I had a good time. I like my therapist. I like my therapist. It's a part of my schedule. But what you're saying is that these kinds of things are actually solvable if you want them to be solvable. So maybe you could give perhaps like expectations. How long would it take to actually solve the idea? Again, we're not saying that you never get stressed out, but how long do you need to break crippling anxiety? What does that actually look like in terms of a time period? If I would say, Yisroel, help me, I'm locked in, I really feel held back by my anxiety. What would you sketch out as sort of what we can expect, what it looks like, how long it needs to take?
So in the therapy world, we hate the question, which is not fair to clients.
That's why that's why I'm a coach, and that's why I'm happy to be talking to a therapist because I value so much this skill set, but to hear you as a therapist, a competent therapist that's been living in that world for so long, saying like this doesn't have to be a forever problem, right? Again, from my coaching side, where I'm like, I work with people that are super specific about what they want, how to get there, and then I give them like realistic expectations of a timeline, right? So tell me a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, so it's I'm in a funny space, like in between the I kind of use both ends a lot of the coaching and the therapy world, but it's a question we don't like because people are like stuck in like, yeah, but we don't know what the trauma someone went through, and we don't, and all that's important. Yeah. But something I very, 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 very strongly believe in is when a client comes, our job is to get them to leave. And we got to start through that lens. And it's unfair, it's unresponsible, and maybe sometimes, I don't want to use this word, maybe too strong, but sometimes I feel it's immoral to take someone who's struggling and be like, let's go through everything that went wrong in your life. That may be wonderful, but right now the person isn't living. So give them life and then you can go back. And I don't think it's necessary, and I'm going to get flack for this, but I don't think it's necessary always to go through all that. So when it comes to anxiety, of all, disorders, anxiety is from the most treatable, and it's the most straightforward approach to dealing with it. We don't need to say, let me go through all the trauma that you went through in life. And it's not fair if we do. I've been thinking about this for a long time. In the past week, I had two clients message me. One of them I mentioned before, saying that I never imagined I would be that way. I never imagined I would go that way. And someone who's been going for help for so long, it's tragic. Another person literally wasn't managing, right? And they had some, changing details here, obviously, but they weren't managing. They couldn't function. They couldn't go to work, couldn't anything. And it's like, I'm having normal days. And it's like, oh, my anxiety, it might be there 5%. What? We worked together like 10 times. like your life's a whole different life. We got to address the anxiety as a piece by itself without automatically going back to everything that's going on in their life. And that's why really I was, for a while now, I've been working on it, but I'm putting together a group really now where we're going to do both. We're going to have individual sessions as well as a group. The group doesn't mean a large group. It means like 3 to 5 people in each group where we're working together on going through the concepts and going through the process, which we've gone all over the place. We got to get back to the process itself, but going through that process step by step of overcoming anxiety, because it can be done. And it's ridiculous that we should struggle so long. And that's a 3-month thing. The whole thing is just 3 months. That's not so long.
So again, I think that that's much more valuable even than the steps itself, is the awareness, number one, that it's not that there's something wrong with you that is the issue. Number one is, it could be that you are just a normal person having a human experience. Number two is that anxiety is an issue in and of itself that is completely treatable. Obviously, again, there are different degrees in a person's background.
Right. It's scary to use words like completely, but 100%.
Right. That being said, probably like 80 to 90% of the people, right, are in this category where they have treatable anxiety. And what does it mean, treatable? It means that you could literally go through your day, you could go through your work day, you could do all of the things that you have to do, parenting and business and all these kinds of things, without that crippling loop, like you said, of heaviness, right? That's possible. You could literally go through your day feeling good, just feeling good, feeling not stressed out, feeling like this isn't such a drag, that, you don't have the world on your shoulders. And how long could that take? You say, again, does it happen forever for everyone? No, but realistically, if you get serious and you actually work on it itself, not every single thing that ever happened in your life, but in itself, I just don't want to have that kind of anxiety. I don't have that emotional pull. That's something that can be solved in 3 months. That's what you're saying.
I guess so.
Amazing.
I guess that's what I'm saying. Basically.
Amazing. Why just for a person that feels frustrated, for a person that is again, what I see the same thing. I can just anticipate the listeners' challenges. When I'm like, no, you seriously can make a lot of money doing what you like to do and people will pay you for it. They're like, yeah, but I'm different. I'm actually messed up. So now here, I'll call you the expert. You're an expert to me. You, the expert who's dealt with this for so many years, right, are saying basically anxiety is treatable, and it's treatable pretty darn quickly. And it's possible to live a life without it. If a person's thinking to themselves, yeah, but not for me, which again, is itself an anxious, anxiety provoking thought, what do you tell them?
It's so tough. And you have this all the time, dealing with people who are like, hey, you can have a life outside that, because when we're in the world of anxiety, we're in our struggle, we can't see out of it. There's that old Talmudic thing, someone who's in prison man needs someone else to get him out of jail. He can't get himself out of jail, right? Because when we're in prison, all we see are the gates of the prison, and there's no life outside it. And that's really the big struggle for so many people, because anxiety has been part of them. A life without anxiety is not something they can even put their hands on. They don't even know what it looks like. And it's part of what makes it tough, because we anticipate anxiety and everything that's going to go on. We're subconsciously tensing up about a situation that's going to happen in a week that there's no quote unquote reason to tense up about. Our whole life revolves around it. It's really, really, really hard to imagine life without it. But when we recognize that, hey, and that's why I feel like going through again, maybe we should go back there, because I feel like we're all over the place, but going through again, like, what does it mean to have anxiety? Not dealing with anxiety. What's happening with all these thoughts? What do you mean? I'm so anxious about X. I'm so anxious about Y. I'm so anxious about Z. How does it go away? So, and I think when someone starts understanding that, it kind of gives them a way like, hey, maybe this makes some sense, and maybe there's something to do about it.
So the easiest way, what you're saying is, if a person is watching this and hearing this, and we're just talking about again, because we're just talking about solving this problem. We're talking about living a life without it. And someone's watching this, they're thinking, not me. So the first thing that should pop up is, do I know anyone outside of the box, meaning the level is to accept kind of lovingly for yourself. It could be, I'm not able to solve this problem. That doesn't mean that no one else can solve this problem for me. Again, going back to the top of our discussion, anxiety itself is the issue. So I'm locked in a box of anxiety. Do I have someone on the outside that either isn't living with it, so I see that it's possible not to live with it, or even better, do I have someone that can actively help me out of my own struggles? Which again, yes, you're right. It definitely does take a certain sense of humility, right? But I also think there's a tremendous amount of grace that we can give ourselves that I just don't know how to do it. It's not like there's something wrong with me. I just haven't been shown how.
Yeah, and I think that's so important with so much of our life. Like, and it's a beautiful thing to think. I think it's this generation as kind of like, especially when I work with kids, it's almost interesting to see it. It's like this new idea of like things new, but it's like things can be solved, like with the tech generation and startups and all that kind of stuff. Like people are feeling like, hey, I could find a way to make this. I could be this entrepreneur. I could find a way around this problem. I could solve this issue and make money out of it. There's like that mindset, which is beautiful to see. Like, hey, if I would gain the knowledge and I would gain the skills, I can actually accomplish things. The reason why I'm anxious is not because something's bad. It's not because I'm bad. It's not because I'm incapable. It's because I'm in a loop that's impossible to get out of unless I get out of the loop. So it's just a recurring theme in my life that's constantly going in that loop that of course I can't get out of because that is my loop. There's no world around it.
So again, just to tighten it up, and then I'm going to ask you how people can find out more about the work that you're doing. So to tighten it up, the idea would basically be that we live in an era where things are figure outable. I think that's kind of the big realization is that, again, what problem couldn't be solved? You want an electric car that could go, 60 miles an hour in 2 seconds. Cool. We have one of those. You want to go to space. You want to solve all kinds of, again, we live in a world where really anything's possible. And so we expect to solve challenges. But on the flip side, we also live in a world where we might expect ourselves to be the one who can solve that problem. And then there's that sadness if we're not able to. So on one hand, we think it can be solved, which again, why wouldn't we want it solved? But on the flip side, we think we kind of overestimate our ability to solve a problem ourselves. And we don't capture that atmosphere of, like you said, getting out of the loop by finding someone who's out of the loop and seeing if they could stop it for us.
100%.
Outstanding.
Exactly as you said.
You're the best.
Exactly as you said. I would love to just put in one piece here because I feel like we talk so much about the concept, but not. We could talk about this for like 1,000 hours.
I know.
But just one piece here. Just getting back to that essential piece. The key to overcoming anxiety is just that this loop stops occurring. That means that when I'm in a situation that's caused me anxiety, say for example, we said someone's afraid of their house burning down. They walk into their house and the thought of, hey, my house burns down comes to my head, and then it leaves. This is not about skills to use. It's not about steps I take in the moment. It's about getting into a place where my mind no longer does that. That's all. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. So, but the subconscious mind doesn't work well with cognition. You can't tell it, think this or think that. We've been trying to. That's why we're locked into this space. Our whole life we're trying to tell ourselves, don't be anxious.
Calm down.
Yeah, calm down. Guess what that does?
Right.
Makes us more anxious, right?
Right.
Every single time. We can't, we're locked in a battle. Just recognize what's happening in your life. You're feeling anxious, so you're fighting that anxiety, which makes it worse instead of making it better. If I would get to a space where that anxiety can sort of flow, man, there's no more picture of my house burning down because that thought, it doesn't lead me to feeling anxious. It doesn't lead me to get tense. It just is. And guess what? We start creating new pictures. We start creating pictures if I could walk into the house and I don't feel nervous about what's going to happen because I'm just not. And that's it. That's the whole thing.
As someone that's actually dealt with that, I can't tell you how freeing. It's shocking. What you're saying is shocking, and I'll tell you why. It's shocking because we build up something to be such a massive wall, and then we're shocked when it isn't the wall at all. And you just walk through the wall, and it's like this huge switch that just happens. And if once you sort of dissolve the wall, you just want to scream at everyone else that stopped on the other side and be like, it's not actually that scary. It's not actually that big. Walk through it with me. But again, like you said, it's so hard because people have to be able to trust that they actually can and that it's actually possible. And inevitably, as we have passed through the wall and we are passing through the walls again, doesn't mean that walls are never, they're just other places, right? But inevitably then people kind of say, well, it must be nice to be you, but it's hard over here. And again, that's the loop. Okay. So we're running out of time. How do people find out more about you, more about your program, what you're working on? Please let us know.
So my main communication to the world is mostly through LinkedIn. Everyone can follow me there, put up a ton of articles, videos, all kinds of stuff. I've been lazy about videos. Maybe we'll get some clips from here. So LinkedIn is a big one. My email, Yisroel@YisroelWahl.com. But it's all listed on LinkedIn, my website. But most of my stuff and getting a better picture of everything that I do is directly found on LinkedIn. Do plan on starting this. It's not a course. It's a direct work. It's one-on-one work, but it also has that group component. And I'm just going to add this part. Everything you're talking about this idea of getting out of the box, that's literally why I lucked into this whole system. When I have 4 people, we're not talking about getting into a group of 10 people. It's not even group therapy. It's literally everyone's working on the things by themselves. But then we have that group and you literally see other people transforming through the steps. You're like, really?
I can't over again. I literally have this conversation with my clients, people I work with. People think I need to solve this by myself. And nothing is more effective than being in a community where other people are solving it also, because that's part of the problem is we think our problems are so unique and so special. And that's why there's just a tremendous dump of good feelings when you're like, oh, wait a minute, this guy did it, right? This person did it. Yeah, we all think I'm going to be that one person it doesn't work for, but overwhelmingly it creates so much momentum because you see that it's actually possible by normal people who are actually accomplishing these things. So I love that idea.
1,000%. And that's why I put out a poll and I was like, would you be willing to get into a group with other people if that would help you overcome anxiety? And you'd be amazed by how many people said, yeah. It was only 20% said no. Like people are willing to do it, but you got to get in that group. Like certain areas are,
And that again, that will I just one other point is that you run a poll and 80% say yeah and the 20% say no. What I would be telling people is the 20% are not yet ready to get out of the anxiety. They're making that conscientious choice and you don't even worry about them, right? Because again, for me, the way that I look at it, the way that when I'm interviewing people of who I'm going to work with, I want to figure out, does it matter as soon as I see someone that starts telling me, the coach, just like I'm sure you, the therapist, what they need, right? I'm like, look, I love you. You're not going to ever break free of this because what it takes is a commitment. I actually want to solve the problem. And so again, the 80% of people that are like, yeah, whatever it takes, right? Those are the people that are actually willing to solve it. So it just, you also have to ask yourself, if you actually want to solve this problem, is this something that you want to solve? I know you want it solved, but are you actually willing to solve it? I'm going to put in front of you, again, like I always talk about, you bring that horse to water. You actually tell them how to do it. It's at the end of the day, it's going to be on the individual. Am I going to take that step or not? And that you as a practitioner can't control.
Yeah. I mean, we can make it, sort of create that belief, which is so hard. People don't see it. So we can try to help them see a different perspective and help them to create that feeling of security. Like I feel good enough to do it, but the actual work, like that famous line goes, you can't solve a problem with the same mindset that you came in, and created the problem to begin with. It doesn't work that way. If you're trying to solve it the same way that you thought you were going to solve it, it won't work because doing the same thing again and again doesn't get us different results.
Amazing. Okay. I appreciate so much the time. Thank you very much.
It's an honor to be here.